Let's imagine a very simple scene. Morgana, an 80-year-old woman, rich and very powerful, enters one of her clothing stores. She owns several businesses around the city. Clothing stores, beauty salons, and even beauty clinics. Always very well dressed with shining jewelry and a haughty manner, Morgana believes she can control everything around her. Now outside this same store, there is Rafael, a young man. He is wearing old and faded clothes, messy hair, and a shy look. Despite his simple appearance, he is there with one goal: to use the little money he has saved to buy a blouse he saw in the window. He believes that with this new outfit, he will have a better chance of getting a job and changing his life. Rafael enters the store, full of hope, but before he can take the first step towards carrying out his plan, he is greeted by Morgana. With a look of contempt, she cannot contain herself. "What are you doing here? This store is not for people like you." Rafael tries to explain, his voice low and full of humility. "Ma'am, I saved up money to buy that blouse on sale. With it, I might be able to get a job interview." But Morgana doesn't want to hear it. For her, appearances are everything. Without even hearing anything else, she calls the security guards and orders them to remove the young man from there. Rafael, humiliated and with his face red with shame, leaves the store with his head down. Morgana, from the height of her arrogance, still watches him leave to make sure he doesn't come back. That moment, for Rafael, was a blow to hope. For Morgana, it was just another normal day in which she believed she was keeping order in her business. But little did she know that this simple act of contempt would be the beginning of a great lesson that would change her life forever. Just imagine, Morgana, that rich and always impeccable lady, was completely stressed after the incident in the store. She had thrown a young man out of there and, even though she had everything in life, her head was full of anger. Feeling a strong headache, she decided to go to the hospital to check if everything was okay. There, she was seen quickly. After all, someone like her wouldn't wait in line like everyone else. The doctors ran some tests and asked her to wait for the results at home. Not very patient with waiting, Morgana thought she could distract herself a bit, so she asked the driver to take her to a jewelry store. When she entered the store, she felt like she was in paradise. Shiny jewelry everywhere. After looking at several pieces, Morgana chose a very expensive ring, the kind that only very rich people could afford. The price? 10,000 reis. For her, that was like buying a cup of coffee. She left the store happy, admiring the shine of the jewel on her finger. But when she looked for her cell phone to call the driver, she realized she had left it in the car. What a distraction, she thought. With no other option, she decided to take a taxi. And that's when everything started to go wrong. While walking down the street trying to find a taxi, she ended up in a more isolated area without realizing it. Suddenly, a man appeared out of nowhere, snatched her purse, and without thinking twice, also took the brand new ring she had just bought. Morgana tried to scream for help, but no one came. And to make matters worse, in the midst of the confusion, she tripped, fell to the ground, and got covered in mud. Her elegant clothes were a disaster. Her perfectly styled hair was completely messed up. She looked like a different person. Tired and still on the ground, Morgana looked around, hoping that someone would come to her aid. But the people passing by simply ignored her. She tried to call for help, but no one even stopped to listen to her. For the first time, Morgana realized what it was like to be invisible. She was used to being treated like a queen, but now, with her unkempt appearance, no one paid any attention. It was only when she stood up, looked at her reflection in a shop window, and saw how she looked that everything made sense. Her expensive clothes were unrecognizable, dirty, and torn. She looked like a homeless person. And at that moment, she began to understand that appearances not only deceive, but also dictate how people treat us. That moment not only shook Morgana, but it planted the first seed of reflection within her. Something needed to change, and perhaps this was the beginning of a great transformation. Now imagine Morgana, all dirty, tired, and with a heart full of sadness, walked down the street without knowing what to do. She tried to ask several people for help, but no one stopped to listen to her. People looked away. Some crossed the street to avoid her. She didn't understand why. Then a young woman passed by her, noticed her condition, and, with a gentle smile, asked, "Do you need help?" Morgana, hesitant and still very shaken, explained the situation. The young woman, without thinking twice, took her cell phone out of her pocket and said, "Use my phone." It was the first time that terrible day that Morgana felt a little kindness. She called the driver, who came to pick her up quickly. When she got home, Morgana went straight to the shower, trying to remove not only the dirt from her body, but also that bitter feeling of having been completely ignored. Sitting in her favorite armchair with her hair still damp, Morgana began to think about everything that had happened. Why didn't anyone want to help me? Why did they treat me like I was nothing? It was then that she remembered something she didn't want to admit. That was exactly how she had treated the young man in the store. She had ignored him, humiliated him, as if he had no value. The reflection deeply affected Morgana. For the first time, she felt connected to the pain of someone who, like her that day, just wanted to be treated with a little dignity. But her thoughts were interrupted when the day came to return to the hospital to get the test results. At the hospital, Morgana was greeted by the doctor, who had a serious expression on his face. He calmly explained, "You have an aneurysm. Surgery will be necessary, but due to your age, there are significant risks." Morgana felt as if the ground had disappeared from under her feet. Her mind was full of questions. What if I don't survive? What have I really done with my life? Have I left anything good for anyone? For the first time, she began to see the fragility of life and to realize that all the money and power in the world could not guarantee her safety or happiness. That news, combined with what she had experienced in the last few days, made Morgana deeply question her attitudes and choices. It was as if life was giving her a warning. There was still time to change, but she needed to decide what really mattered before it was too late. After everything she had experienced and reflected on, Morgana had a very different idea. Something that would never have crossed her mind before. She decided to disguise herself. That's right. She wore old, torn clothes, messed up her hair until she was unrecognizable, and left all traces of elegance aside. She wanted to find out how her employees treated people, especially those who seemed to be going through hardships like she had. When she finished getting ready, she looked in the mirror and barely recognized herself. Will they treat me like they treated that guy? She thought, filled with courage. She called the driver and explained, "Today we're going to visit some of my stores, but no one can know who I am." Thus began her journey. The first stop was at one of her beauty clinics, a place she had created with great pride years ago. When she went in just to ask for a glass of water, she was greeted with suspicious looks. Before she could even finish speaking, an attendant called security. "This place is not for you. You better leave before we have to forcibly remove you." Morgana was shocked. How could someone be so rude? But she said nothing and left. Her heart was heavy. Was this what happened every day at her business? Had her employees learned this behavior from her? The next stop was one of the more upscale hair salons she owned. When she walked in, people looked her up and down, whispering to each other. She asked to have her hair done and said she could pay, showing a wad of cash she had brought with her. Even so, the receptionist called the manager, and Morgana could tell they were suspicious of her. When she saw the manager dialing 3 numbers on the phone, she realized what was happening. They're calling the police. They don't think someone who looks like that can have that much money. With a heavy heart, she asked the driver to take her away before something worse happened. Morgana began to notice a pattern. Her employees weren't treating people with respect, exactly as she used to. At each store she visited, the story repeated itself: disdainful looks, harsh words, and no one offering help. After a few visits, she became discouraged. Are all my businesses like this? Have I created a culture where only those who seem rich and important matter? She thought. She knew something was very wrong, but at the same time, this experience opened her eyes. For the first time, Morgana saw how her own attitudes influenced the behavior of those who worked for her. That journey was hard, but necessary. Deep down, Morgana felt that she was learning something valuable. True success was not just about money or power, but about treating everyone with respect, regardless of how they looked or what they had. It was time to change, not just herself, but everything she had built. And this was just the beginning. Morgana, now completely transformed on the outside, dressed in old clothes and messy hair, decided to go into one of her most famous beauty salons. She knew that there was always an elegant clientele and well-trained staff, or at least that was what she thought. As soon as she walked through the door, she noticed the curious and suspicious looks. People began to whisper, and the employees looked at her strangely as if she didn't belong there. Even so, Morgana went to the counter and asked something simple. "I'd like to get my hair done. I can pay." She opened her purse and showed her the money. But this only made the attendant even more suspicious. The employee called the manager, who appeared with a forced smile and asked Morgana to wait a moment. While she waited, Morgana saw the manager pick up the phone and quickly dial 3 numbers. That's when she realized they were calling the police. Her heart sank. Is this how people saw me when I was arrogant? Thinking they had every right to judge others, she thought. Without waiting for any more humiliation, Morgana left the salon and asked the driver to take her somewhere else. Despite feeling discouraged, she decided to visit her busiest clothing store. "I need to know if they still treat people with respect anywhere," she said to herself. When she entered the store, something unexpected happened. She saw Rafael, the young man she had thrown out days before, also coming in. He was still wearing the same simple clothes, but he seemed more confident. Morgana, not recognizing him, remained quiet and watched from a distance. The manager, Lucas, walked over to Rafael with a warm smile and shook his hand. "Rafael, it's great to see you again. How did the blouse you bought go?" Rafael smiled shyly. "It fits great. I managed to save up some money and came to buy some pants and a pair of shoes. I want to look presentable for a job interview." Lucas listened attentively and then said something that surprised Morgana. "Listen, if you're looking for a job, we can help you right here. It's not the most glamorous position, but we have an opening in the warehouse. How about starting tomorrow?" Rafael almost cried with emotion. He tried to hug Lucas, but hesitated, remembering that he was dirty and wearing simple clothes. Lucas noticed and said, "No way, my friend. Here, we treat everyone as equals." They hugged, and Rafael thanked him with shining eyes. Morgana, on the other side of the store, froze. For the first time, she saw the kind of person who wanted to represent her business. Someone like Lucas, who treated everyone with respect and humanity. After observing in silence, Morgana felt something new inside her, a mixture of shame for what she had done in the past and hope that she could change, just as Lucas showed was possible. She knew there was still a lot of work to do, but that store and that manager were a starting point for transforming not only her company, but herself. Morgana, watching everything from afar, saw the genuine happiness in Rafael's eyes when Lucas offered him the job. She realized how much that small gesture of kindness meant to him. For the first time, Morgana felt a sincere desire to help someone, without expecting anything in return. Inspired, she went to the store sales section, picked up a pair of pants and shoes that she knew would be perfect for Rafael, and went to the cashier. She paid for the items without attracting attention, put everything in a bag, and went to where Rafael was sitting, eating a snack and smiling from ear to ear. Without saying who she was, Morgana approached and handed him the bag. "Here, it's a gift." Rafael looked at her in surprise, still not recognizing her because of her unkempt appearance. "I can't accept," he began, but Morgana interrupted. "Of course you can. It's something simple, but I hope it helps you." Without giving him time for more questions, she smiled and quickly left the store, getting into her car before he could thank her. When Rafael opened the bag and saw the new clothes, he was so excited that he looked around for the lady, but she had already disappeared. The next day, Morgana returned to the store, but this time as she really was, dressed in her elegant clothes, wearing shiny jewelry and a perfume that seemed to announce her arrival before she even entered. Rafael, who was now working in the stockroom, froze when he saw her. He recognized her immediately and thought he was going to be thrown out again. With butterflies in his stomach, Rafael lowered his head, but Morgana approached and, to his surprise, smiled. "Rafael, I can see that you are trying hard. Keep it up. I have high expectations for you." Rafael, unable to believe what he was hearing, stammered, "Thank you, ma'am. I promise to do my best." Morgana looked at him with a different sparkle in her eyes, something no one had seen before. "I know you will. And just for the record, those pants really look great on you." Rafael was speechless, while Morgana left the store with a slight smile on her face. She didn't need to say anything else. That moment was enough to show that her attitude was changing. It wasn't just about giving gifts or making a nice gesture. It was about recognizing the value of people, something she had never done before. That day, Morgana realized that it is not luxury or status that defines who you are, but how you choose to treat people. And by encouraging Rafael, she not only changed his life a little, but also transformed herself. Morgana, now a woman transformed by what she had experienced and learned, decided it was time to make real changes in her companies. She scheduled a meeting with all of her managers. It was no ordinary meeting. Everyone felt that something big was about to happen. When Morgana entered the room, she was impeccable as always, but her gaze and posture had something different. She seemed more serious, but also more human. All eyes turned to her as she began to speak. In the last few days, I have experienced situations that have opened my eyes. I discovered that the success of a company is not only in profits or the number of customers, but in how we treat people. Unfortunately, I have realized that many of you have not followed this idea. The room fell into total silence. Morgana began to talk about her undercover visits, the humiliation she suffered, and how she saw employees treating customers disrespectfully. Some managers began to shift uncomfortably in their chairs, already understanding what she was getting at. "I'm not innocent," Morgana continued. "I know that for a long time, I created an environment where the focus was only on money and status. But that's going to change starting today." She picked up a list and began to read out some names one by one. These were the managers she would fire. "If you can't respect people, there's no place for you here." After the initial shock, Morgana turned to Lucas, the manager of the store where she saw Rafael being treated with respect. "Lucas, you showed what really matters in a company. Effort, ethics, and above all, respect for customers and employees. That's what we need." Lucas was surprised and even a little nervous when Morgana announced, "Starting today, you will be the leader of all my stores. Your way of treating people is the example I want to see in each of my ventures." Lucas stood up, stuttering with emotion. "Ms. Morgana, I don't know what to say. Thank you for the opportunity. I promise I won't disappoint you." Morgana smiled, but this time it was a genuine smile, full of pride. "I trust you, Lucas. And please, don't be like I was in the past. Continue to be fair, empathetic, and above all, human." The meeting ended with an air of renewal. Morgana knew that these changes would not be easy, but she also knew that they were necessary. It was the beginning of a new era for her companies and mainly for herself. After all, she had learned that leading with respect and compassion was the true key to success. Morgana was about to face one of the most challenging moments of her life: surgery. Sitting in the hospital waiting room, with her hands shaking and her heart racing, she thought about everything she had experienced up until that moment. Even though she was used to facing the world with confidence and determination, at that moment, she felt small, vulnerable, and full of fear. As she waited, her mind was in turmoil. What if something goes wrong? What if I don't wake up? She thought. But what gripped her heart the most was not the fear of the surgery itself, but the regret she carried. Morgana began to remember the times when, at the height of her arrogance, she had ignored or humiliated others. How could I have been so blind? So much power, so much wealth, and I never thought of using it to truly help someone.